Jacob makes a decision, and he decides in his heart of hearts to love Joseph more than the rest of his children. And the Torah gives us a reason why. The Torah says, Ki ben zikunim hu lo. Ben zikunim, loosely translated, means the child of his old age, the golden child. And our commentaries don't all translate it that way. There is a famous translation. If anyone would open a chumash, a most basic chumash, book of Torah, has these three things going on in it. Number one, the Torah itself, the verses. No specific order. After that, you have a Aramaic translation called Targum Onkelos. Onkelos actually was the one who transcribed the translation of our Torah into Aramaic. And then we have Rashi, our foremost and main commentary on the Chumash. Onkelos, the Aramaic translation, doesn't translate Ben Zekunim to mean son of old age. He actually translates it, and I'll quote, he says, Bar Hakim, that he was a wise son, a very smart, ingenious child. This is how he translates it. So many ask, what does that mean? Does that mean Joseph was smarter than the rest? Joseph was younger. You're going to tell me that Jacob's other sons were not smart? So Joseph was the smartest? How would you answer that? So listen to the following. Midrash tells us that a man who marries a woman and a woman who marries a man have intentions when they form that bond. And the purest of intentions are evident in their children. Meaning, if a Mr. and Mrs. get together and have children who are smart, the Midrash says, and wise, it means that their initial intention when they came together to get married was actually for pure and good intentions, selfless intentions more than selfish intentions. There was a rabbi by the name of Rabbi Judah Rosenes who lived prior to the Zera Shimshon, and he writes in the book called Parashat the following. He says, if you want to look at how successful a bond and a marriage actually is, there's a way to do so. There's proof. Look at the children. If you want to know if two people got together and one of them or both of them got married for the money or for the good looks or for power, prestige, fame, you'll see the evidence. The kids won't be anything special. But on the contrary, you could know when two people get together and get married that they had pure intentions to build together, to grow together, to bring holy children into this world, to serve God and fulfill their mission in life. When the children come out and the children are smart and wise and doing things which are correct to themselves, their family, and to society. Based on this, the Zera Shimshon explains that Jacob had a chip on his shoulder, so to say. Not like he did anything wrong, but the word out in the street was that Jacob did something not right. And that was that he married two sisters. We know our Torah tells us that the same man should not marry two sisters. Right? Brothers can marry sisters. That's not a problem. But one man should not marry two sisters. Nowadays, we're not going to get into it, but one man should have only one wife. Let's move on. We're not going to speak about that now. But Jacob had this issue. He had people going around saying, "Oh, you're so pious, you're such a man of God, you married 2 sisters. What do you have to say for yourself?" And Jacob now realized he had to prove to everyone that what he did was the right decision and he did it for pure intentions. They went around saying, "You know why you married Rachel?" Because, again, his intention when he married Rachel was that she'd be the only one. Lavan snuck Leah in. He married Leah. He should have stopped. Why did he go and marry Rachel? The Torah tells us, back in chapter 29, verse 17, Ve'enei Leah rakot. Leah's eyes were swelled up because of her crying. We'll say it that way, because that she was not going to marry her shidduch. Her real match was Esav, because she saw only Jacob came. She didn't see that he came with Esav. So she was not so attractive. And the Torah tells us, but Verachel and Rachel, hayta yefat toar vifat mareh. She was very beautiful. So the jokesters, the troublemakers, they were going around saying, "Oh, Mr. Pious Jacob, man of God, the only reason why you married Rachel was for her looks, was for her good beauty. You're not so observant. You're not so pure in your intentions." So Jacob now had to prove them wrong. The Zera Shimshon says, you know how he was going to prove them wrong? He was going to prove them wrong through the results, through the conclusions of that relationship. What were the results of that relationship? His children. But his child and his children specifically through Rachel. Who was Rachel's firstborn? Joseph. So what did Jacob do? Jacob put all of his might and power into making sure that Joseph would be bright, smart, wise, well-educated. He was the only one of his children that he sat down and taught him everything he learned from his grandfather Abraham, everything he learned from his father Isaac, and everything he learned from those 14 years that he spent in the yeshiva of Shem and Ever. This kid, Joseph, was no dummy, to the point where in the following Torah portions, we're going to see how he was no dummy. He was actually acclaimed to be the smartest man in the world, or in civilization, known civilization at that time. He was very, very bright. Jacob spent a daily basis with each of his children teaching them Torah. But he put so much more efforts into Joseph, not out of favoritism. Even though the Torah tells us, V'Yisrael ahavit Yosef, Jacob loved Joseph more than all of his other sons. But why did he love him more than his other sons? The Zera Shimshon tells us, you know why? Because he had to prove to the world, he had to prove to all the jokesters that his relationship and his intention with marrying Rachel was not for money and not for good looks and not for selfish reasons. It was, as we say in Hebrew, L'Shem Shamayim, for the sake of God, for the sake of fulfilling his mission in this world. And the only way he could prove that was, as we learned earlier from the Midrash, based on the results, based on the children that will come out from that relationship. Namely, Joseph being the first one to consummate that marriage, which would be having that first child. And that explains why would Jacob spend more of his time with his son? Not because he favored him, because he had a point to prove. Why would Jacob give Joseph a shiny, beautiful, colorful coat? In order to promote animosity amongst the brothers? No. So that everyone knows that's the child that's the proof. That's the child that's going to prove that mine and Rachel's relationship was for real, for devotion to God and not for selfish reasons. As the Talmud says, a Torah scholar needs to dress well, needs to represent himself, because he's not doing it for himself, he's dressing properly, and he's taking care of the way he acts and the way he dresses for what he represents, which is God through the Torah that he learns. So in the in the religious world, we would say that the first frock, if anyone who knows exactly what it is, that those are the long black coats, was actually worn, it wasn't long and black, it was long and colorful, by Joseph, who was given to him by his father Jacob. So Jacob had no intention to create any animosity. He had a goal. He had to spend the most amount of time with this son, and he had to make sure this son was bright and wise, and a Talmid Chacham, a Torah scholar, and that he had to be identifiable. He had to wear this shiny, beautiful, colorful coat so everyone would know this is the proof that his relationship was for real. And I'll end off with a question that we all have to ask ourselves. To those of us who are married, the question is relevant right now, or maybe sometimes it's too late, sometimes it's something to think about. And to those who aren't married yet, it's a question you need to ask yourself, either into or before you get into a relationship. And the question is, why have you married your husband? Why did you marry your wife? Why are you going to marry him, or why are you going to marry her? Is it for his or her good looks? Is it for the money they bring to the table? Is it for their last name? Is it for the fame? Is it for where you're going to move? You know, some people like setting up their kids with other prospects from Florida, because then you can move down to Florida, it's great. Are those the reasons why we are getting married, or we're getting our children married off? Or is the reason as following? Do I find a commonality or something that we can work together? Do we see ourselves as compatible to fulfill our life's mission and grow together and refine together and build together, or not? When that's the reason, and that's the L'Shem Shamayim, that's for the sake of God, to come together and have children, bring children into this world, raise them in the right direction, in the direction and the missions of God and Torah and mitzvot and good deeds. That is for the sake of God. So are we coming in on a selfish manner? What can I get out of this? Or on what can we do together? How can we build together? That would be the greatest way. And it's never too late. Because no matter if you're already married, and maybe we didn't get married for the greatest of intentions, but right now, what's keeping us together? Hollywood, California tells us, get married for the good looks, get married to live happily ever after. That's all a fairy tale. It's all a story. Don't be blinded by the world that we live in and the whole industry of entertainment, and nowadays more than ever, social media. It's all, as we say in Hebrew, sheker. It's all a lie. We have to look at our own spouse or at our own prospective spouse underneath the skin. Because I'll tell you the way it is. I won't fluff this up. But as beautiful as you were, or as she was, or vice versa, before you got married, or at the wedding, it's definitely not the same afterwards. On a physical way, it only goes downhill from there. We have to be honest with ourselves. On a physical way. But when you connect to the soul of that person, contrary. They become even more attractive. Not because it's a physical attraction and that's what I'm so dying for. No, it's that closeness of the souls. It's that merging of the hearts and the minds. Yes, we are physical human beings. We have this combination of spirituality and physicality. But what's going to keep us together? It's not only physicality, because physicality is empty without the soul, without the heart, without the mind. And the same is vice versa. If there's only spirituality, well, there's also, we're human beings, we're not angels. There's also no connection. We need to make it a point in our lives to grow with our spouses and that every single day and week and month is even better than it was before we were married, and better than the wedding. Just better and better and better each time. If you would take a graph of a marriage which is dysfunctional, the apex of the marriage was the wedding. And then it slowly dwindles down. Yeah, sometimes you have a little spurt, you have a honeymoon, boom, boom, and then you have different things in life, better, lower, but over a graph, it's going downhill. A Torah marriage, a marriage which has the perspective and godliness of our Torah, is the opposite. The lowest point, and it's a blessing that I want to give us, that the lowest point of our marriages should be our weddings. That sounds like a curse, but it's not. It's the greatest blessing ever. Because if that's the lowest point of your marriage, that means every day and every week and every month. Yes, it will also be up and down a little bit, but over a long graph, over a decade or two, or many decades of marriage, we find ourselves as a couple much higher, much greater, attracted to one another on a physical, spiritual, emotional level, much more than before. Because we shared together. We went through hard times together. We went through great times together. We built together. We brought beautiful children into this world, and we built them up together as well. And that is a blessing that we hope that we all have. We hope in the merit of studying the Zera Shimshon's holy words that we also look into our spouse or look into our prospective spouse and see, how can I make this relationship a relationship of growth through investment, opposed to a Hollywood, California relationship where it's a spiral downwards.